Welcome to Debut Writers, the podcast that takes you on an inspiring journey through the world of writing and publishing. We are your hosts. I'm Bree.
And I'm Anne, and we are thrilled to be your guides as we talk tips and strategies to help you become a successful writer and get your work out into the world. Today, we are identifying your personal why for writing your book, which is so important because it will keep you focused and committed on this arduous journey.
Yes, like we talked about in episode 1. So, not to put you on the spot, Anne, but I think it's a great place to start. Why was writing your book so important to you?
So I had spent a number of years in a mental health career. That was my degree was psychology and criminology, victimology. So I was working with young children that were suffering pretty severe abuse in the home. And that weighs on you after a few years. And to see and to hear the stories and to kind of try to be helpful and learn that a lot of what I was doing was spinning my wheels and not really helping these children, these parents. And it's a heartbreaking situation to find yourself in, which is why they always talk about that burnout rate being so high, is because after a certain amount of time, you have to just step away because it's just kind of rotting your insides. But so when I stepped away, I really had the idea for a lost woman. And it's this idea because of a parent and a child, the visceral relationship you have with your family, like this obligation that you have to be there for them despite what they do to you. I remember speaking with one child who had been severely beaten by his father, and his only question was, when do I get to see my dad again? And I was like, why not for a very long time? And why is that the thing that you want most right now? Like trying to understand kind of the psychology behind that. And then also, I have had a tumultuous relationship with my own father, and we've gone in and out of relationships. We're good right now, but we've been through some times where I felt like his presence was toxic for one reason or the other, but I still loved him and he was still my dad. So it's like, where does that all come from? So like the story of a lost woman was me really trying to process what I was going through, and then also what I worked with numerous children as they went through it. And so the story, I literally just got a review, and it's my first bad review. So I was like, yeah, I finally, I don't feel like you're officially an author until a complete stranger reads your book and gives you a bad review. That's like, I have made it, by
You
the
made
way.
it.
I've made it. I'm a real author now. But they said this book was depressing from beginning to end. They said the only great part, the only pretty beautiful, wonderful part was at the very end. And I was like, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. That is exactly what it is. Because it's a very depressing, it's the relationship between a mother and daughter is toxic. They're alcoholics, they're abusive, they're trying to break the cycle of violence. What does that look like? And so, but all of that was kind of me trying to process what I had witnessed and what I was going through personally. And so when I got to the end of the book, and I was so proud. Sometimes I read my stuff and I think, did I really write that? That was good. Like, that was really powerful. Like, I'm impressed with myself. But when I got to the end of that book, I was like, okay, I have to share this with people, because even if it helps just one person understand what this book helped me understand, that's worth it to me. And so that is why I went into the querying trenches, and I was there for years, and I just like never gave up on this book, is because I really just wanted to put it out there to help other people. And if that wasn't my why, I would have dropped it a long time ago. 'Cause it, again, like we said, being realistic, like it's a huge time and money commitment. And for me as a working mom, like there were things I had to give up with my family to get this done. And so it really had to mean a lot to me.
Well, it makes me think of that saying that everyone talks about, write what you know.
Mhm.
In every genre, people are pulling from stuff that they know. I even think about fantasy authors too, where if you read any of their interviews, sometimes they'll talk about the setting or the characters or anything. And I even know you've written fantasy too. And there are people that inspire those characters. There are places that inspire those settings. Like it is a lot about writing what you know. And even this is in our newsletter, but Ernest Hemingway's quote is, in order to write about life, first you must live it. And it can be one little thing, like you were talking about. You really had one specific experience with multiple people, but it kind of dials back to one specific experience that then you were able to turn into a story. Your book, A Lost Woman Too, makes me think about one of the authors I'm working with who also had a past career in, it wasn't mental health per se, but it really did come down to that, working with young boys in a home, and how he has turned that into a book that he's been working on for a very long time. Uh, Also processing everything that he saw and what those boys went through in that decade and that time.
Yeah. Being a writer is you are in that artistic world. So, like, why does a painter paint? Why does a musician sing? Why does an actor act? All of these people have their why. They have their, at their core, I'm doing this because it feeds me. It does something for me. And that's really the first step. We say when you're writing your book, you're writing your book for you. When you're editing your book, you're editing the book for the reader. Like that's when you think about, okay, well, what does the reader want to know right now? What does the reader want to like take away from this? But when you're writing the book, you're writing it for you. And so that's really important to understand the why, like what is the point of me writing this book? What are the reasons for me to sit down every day and put time into this?
And when you're looking at the practical side of it too, knowing your why is going to keep you focused on that, so that you know what the ultimate goal is with that story. Why are you doing it? What are you trying to get out? What do you want to share with the world? Why are you doing it? That is going to help you stay focused throughout that entire story.
Well, and give you confidence because let's be honest, you're going to need it. You're going to hear a
Yeah.
lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of criticism, and you're going to have a lot of people that feel like they can pass judgment on what you've written and how you've written it, no matter what. People today just feel like they can judge you for whatever. But so being confident and knowing the purpose and why you're writing this book, because it is you are being very vulnerable putting it out there into the world, basically putting something out there and saying, yes, please judge me on this entire novel. I'm
It's
okay
so
with that.
vulnerable. It's so vulnerable and it's so hard to do, but knowing your why is also you knowing what's important to you about your story. And I can't tell you how challenging it can be to work with an author that doesn't know why their book is important to them, because someone else, we can't tell you that. I can't tell you your why.
Well, and if
I
your book's not important to you, why should it be important to somebody else to read it?
Exactly. And I think, knowing why it's important to you is going to help you then in determining your publishing path, to figuring out which direction you want to go, because there are going to be some paths that might make more sense depending on what your why is and depending on what you care about most when it comes to your story. Um, I know I brought her up in the last episode, but the conversation I had with her was just so impactful. But Allison Larkin, when we were talking about her book, The People We Keep, and where that story came from and why that was so important to her, there were some specific components that she cared about deeply, and other people wanted to change them, and it would have made the story something completely different. But she really stood firm in what was important to her about that story. And now, I mean, now look at her book and where it is and where that it's gone, and or where it's gone. And that's hard to do, but knowing that at your core, what's important about your story is so important for the entire process.
And Brie, I always say, like, if you can tell me your main goal for wanting to publish this book, I can tell you what publishing path is probably going to be the most successful for you. And we'll talk about that in later episodes when we get to the publishing part.
Yeah,
But
that's a whole conversation.
it's a whole different conversation. But it's really true. I mean, I talk with dozens of authors in a week who have written books, who are want to write books, who are just generally have an idea. They're putting a book together to support their business. They're putting a memoir together because they want to leave their legacy behind. They're putting out a children's book because it's the book that they've read to their kid every night and they just want the book in hand to be able to read it to them. Or a big reason behind why I really, really wanted to get this book published too was I had spent so much time on this and my kids had seen that. And I wanted to show them you can accomplish your dreams. Like just keep fighting, just keep digging, just, have that grit and don't give up, And so again, you know your why and you know why you want to put it out there. And then that motivation of like, my kids have to see me succeed in this. Like I gotta get this done one way or the other. I think down here in the South, we say come hell or high water, like it's going to happen.
Yep. Oh, that's so good. It is what's going to motivate you to get it done. And your why is going to be a huge, huge, huge part of it because you are going to encounter obstacles. And if you don't know why you're doing it, you're going to fall off the tracks. You have to figure out what's going to keep you motivated through those challenges. And because they're going to come, like no matter what, there's going to be something. So on that note, what are some of the common obstacles that you think many writers face?
I think a lot of obstacles writers face is confidence, like feeling confident in where their story is going, that it's worth it. So again, like if it's worth it to you, then that confidence piece of is it worth it to somebody else or is this good enough for somebody else? Just make it good enough for you. Make it what you want it to be. Write it for yourself first. That is how you get through that book. When you have writer's block, that's a huge another obstacle. By the way, when I am cleaning my house, like I'm deep cleaning, like I'm like, let's wipe down all the blinds today. I am procrastinating my writing 100%. Like, all of a sudden I'm like cleaning deep, like I've got like the toothbrush and I'm like cleaning out in the bathroom and I'm like, oh my God, I should be writing. Like I
We
am
all do it.
totally procrastinating. But for writer's block for me, something that I try to push through is I just try to sit down and write. So I
Set a
just,
timer,
yeah,
even set a timer and just write.
because even if you're like, like in the last episode, I talked about like, sometimes I'm writing, I'm thinking like, this is never going to make it into the book. This is awful. Like, what am I writing? This is so pointless. But then all of a sudden, as I'm writing that scene or I'm writing that something that character says, then what I really need pops into my head. Again, I'm a free writer. I'm not really a know what you're going to get into yet. It's kind of developing as I go. So then it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, now I know the next point. Even if you're like sitting there and you can't write anything to your story, like sitting there and saying like, okay, well, I'm just going to write a journal. So I also write for a blog, Pensacola Moms Collective, about being a mom. So if I'm like struggling with my book, I'll be like, all right, let me go write an article real quick. And like, let me chunk out an article about like being a mom real quick. And then as I'm writing that, I remember something or something comes up and then, oh my gosh, now I'm ready. So I go back to the book, or I just try to, sometimes I immerse myself. Like I'm writing the second installment to my YA fantasy. So I'm trying to only watch YA fantasy right now. I'm trying to only read it. And so I'm like completely immersed in it, right? I'm not like getting distracted with other ideas and stuff like that. I think some other obstacles authors face is potentially that time. Like if you are in a situation like us where you're working full time or you have a family, that taking time away from that can be really hard. So again, set attainable goals, which we're going to be talking about in the next episode. My goal is to write 1 hour a day. It's a little hard to find on some days, but I'm like, it's just an hour. Like just sit down and block an hour. I just got a planner for the new year and it's a special planner because it's a goal planner. It's not like a write down your hourly
Your
plan.
day.
I don't need that. That's what my Google Calendar is for because I need those reminders of what's about to happen, the meetings I'm about to have in my life. But it's writing those goals and Bree, back to the goals. Like I wrote the goal and it's like, why is this important to you? And I'm like, oh, Okay. So it's like you have to write down like what my goal is and why it's important to me. And so I'm really liking my new journal. I was playing around with it last night. But so I've written in there like write 1 hour a day. So that's like kind of my big goal. And everybody writes at a different pace. So, if you need to write more than that because you're trying to get through the book quicker and you have more time in a day or you have less time in a day, it's just you have to just set yourself a schedule and try to stick to that schedule as much as you can. So, like Abby said, even if you're not writing to the book, you're sitting down and you're writing something.
Absolutely. Well, and I like the idea of you saying, okay, I set an hour a day because realistically, that's maybe going to happen 4 or 5 days of the week. And that's okay. But that's okay because you still said, you said it and you know that you're going to attempt to accomplish that and then give yourself a little bit of grace to be like, well, there are some days it's just not going to happen because kids or work or something's going to get in the way, but you're always going to pick back up because you have that daily goal. And so I think that's really important. I know for me too, and this is a lot of it is dependent on your situation. And that's why, like, you have to figure out what works for you. I work from home. I don't leave my house very often. And so for me, I can hit an obstacle where I'm like, I have to get out. And so, how you're talking about, like, you're immersing yourself in the world that you're trying to, the space that you want to write into more. Sometimes, like, I just find inspiration just going somewhere else, whether it's going for a walk. And if you've been staring at your screen for so long, you're like, I need nature
Yeah.
and different sounds and sights and smell, like, just go for a walk. And I know that sometimes that's where I do my best thinking when it either comes to my book or if I'm really hung up on even someone else's book. I'm like, okay, let me just walk this out a little bit. Or, and not everyone works well this way, but for me, sometimes just going to a coffee shop, I know some people find that distracting. When I've been cooped up inside the same four walls for a very long time, getting out somewhere else and can really help to just get my brain going. It's inspiring. It can help me, boost some of that creative side when, again, you have those different sights, different sounds. You might see something, notice an interaction between someone else. You're observing what's around you, even just by being there. And that can kind of jog your skills to get them going when you are feeling a little bit of a lull.
Well, I think we talked about that, or we didn't talk about it on the last episode, but it was in our newsletter. Kind of what are the three things a writer needs? And it's experience, observation, and imagination. So, yeah, getting out there sometimes and just like going, to Target or going to the grocery store, going to the coffee shop, or just walking around downtown. We have a wonderful downtown area where I'm from in Pensacola, and my office is downtown. So sometimes it's just like, let me get out and walk because writing can be isolating. We've talked about that, but is very stationary. So like I have to do movement every day. So whether I'm like going and I'm playing a sport or whether I'm just walking, I try to really also set that time into my schedule too, to like, you have to go like walk around the park twice today, or you have to go like walk to get your lunch and back to the office. Don't drive the 2 feet down the street. It's just walk. It's okay. You got time. But those kinds of things where it's like, taking those moments to so I used to be a teacher and we called them brain breaks.
Yep. Those are so good. Your brain, it needs a break.
Yes. And so Bree, being an author coach and people coming to you and saying like, I want to write a book about X, Y, or Z, like, what are some of the reasons that people are coming to you and saying that they want to write a book?
So, similar to you, I would say a lot of people start or have started writing because it's therapeutic for them. And it typically does dial back to a single experience that they had. And then, for the most part, I work with fiction authors. So then they are trying to build that into a story. On the other hand, though, I have worked with one nonfiction author, and I would say he had a singular key message. And it was actually a message that he has spent, I don't even know, a huge chunk of his life just living that daily. And the more he talked about it with people, the more he felt like he could share that specific message and that it could make a difference in someone else's life. But again, it starts with he was doing something for himself and then felt that that message could be impactful for other readers. And so I think that those are the two that I have come across the most, is that it's been a therapeutic start, and then or there was a key message of some sort that they really wanted to be able to share. And it's not, it comes back to, not, they don't expect to share it with millions of people tomorrow, but if they think this could help one person, this could help one person, that's where it's really started with the authors that I have worked with. What are some of the other ones that you've experienced when working with other authors?
I think there's a lot of escapism with writing too. A lot of people
And
have
reading, so that
these.
makes sense.
Yes, they have the stories in their mind and they really want to experience them and live them as if it's happening. And so then that's what they're writing about. Like we said, you work with a lot of fantasy and fiction authors. So when I'm talking to high fantasy authors, it's about this otherworldly stuff. And I love high fantasy. I cannot write it. I have tried and failed miserably, but I love it. And so I love reading it. I love watching it. Like, it's one of my favorite things because I love just this whole idea of a whole nother world, a whole nother like level of technology, level of fashion, like just all of that stuff. I love escaping into that. And so I've had ideas in my head and again tried to write it, but it was fun for me. It was just like I saw this world in my head and I was just super excited about it. And so like sometimes that's what writing is too. Is just there's a level of therapeuticness I think into everything that an artist does, but just that fun escape sometimes is why people are writing. I also, through my profession, meet with a lot of nonfiction authors. Like that's kind of the publisher I work with. That's something that they're really big in. The space that they're big in is nonfiction. And authors are coming because they want to be recognized as a thought leader. They want to put this book out there so then that people will come to them and say, you're a leader in this space. We want to have you at a speaking engagement. We want to hire your business. We want you to just basically kind of like own this space. They want to own a space, right? Or they want to put a book out to help gain more clients. I've had authors say it's the best business card they ever wrote. So it's like,
Yeah.
they hand it out like candy on Halloween because it gets them clients. And that was the purpose of that book, right? And a lot of memoirs that come to us, because we do a lot of memoirs too, it's about people have told me my life was important. People told me I have this message, that I have this something to say. Kind of like the why behind my book is, if my book can help one person, if my book can inspire or encourage or, help somebody get through a difficult time, then I mean, my book's done its purpose, right? So a lot of that with the memoirs too, or just, I want to leave something behind for my kids. So interesting story. So I lost my grandfather while I was writing A Lost Woman, when, spoiler alert, someone does die in the book. And I mean, it's not hard to figure it out when you start reading the book, but it literally starts with a death scene. But so it's not a spoiler alert, too bad. But I actually lost my grandfather during that time. And just as I'm like writing, because I had to write his eulogy and like stand up and speak at his funeral, as I'm writing that and people are telling me stories about him, I just realized how little I actually knew about my grandfather before he was my grandfather. Like the kind of father he was, he was in the military. Like I never heard any of those stories. So like if I could have had a book written by him to like know what his life was, like that would have been invaluable to me. So like a lot of times people are coming for that reason too.
Absolutely. I do think of that a lot. I know we've mentioned it, is that sometimes it's a book that's even just for their family, just to so that they can turn to it and know all that life that they lived. I know we've talked about that with our personal family members too, where we say, "Oh, I wish this person would write a book," or "I wish this person would have written that book," because you want to know, and it's part of your legacy and a part of your journey that other people might be interested in. So lots of different reasons why, but it's important to know what yours is for a whole host of reasons. But especially at this beginning stage, it's going to help keep you focused.
Yes. So, check out the today's goal because surprise, surprise, it might have something to do with identifying your why. And once you do that, it kind of leads into our next episode of setting up those attainable long term goals. So, what are realistic daily writing goals for yourself? What is a realistic? How long should it take you to write a book? How long should it take you to outline and prepare to write a book? So we'll be talking about that on the next episode, kind of setting that up and diving into what that looks like on a day to day basis.
Awesome. Tune in to find out then.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Debut Writers. Make sure to check out our newsletter for your 3 T's and subscribe to never miss an empowering conversation.
Stay inspired and keep writing.